I am sitting across from a man who cannot finish a single sentence. Each time he begins to speak, he stops, not because he forgets what he wants to say, but because a thought interrupts him. A thought so disturbing that even allowing it to pass through his mind feels like a crime. He presses his lips together. His hands remain folded, tight, controlled. His body is rigid, as if movement itself might invite the thought back again. I am afraid, he finally says, of what my mind does when I am not watching it. I have heard this before, but never with such precision. He tells me he is a lawyer, educated, disciplined, moral to the point of exhaustion. He lives by rules he has invented for himself, rules that no one else has asked him to obey, yet none of them protect him from what happens inside his own head. The thoughts arrive without warning, they do not ask permission, they attach themselves to people he loves. His father, a woman he hopes to marry. When he speaks their names, his voice lowers, as if something dangerous has been summoned. He tells me that a story was once told to him, something he heard in passing, something grotesque, something he wishes he had never learned. He does not want to repeat it. He hesitates, his breathing changes. I am afraid, he says, that if I tell you it will make it real. I remain silent. Silence is not emptiness, silence is pressure. Eventually, the story forces its way out. It is a tale of punishment, cruel, imaginative, excessive, a form of torture so elaborate that the mind cannot easily release it once it has taken shape. He does not describe it fully. He does not need to. What matters is not the image itself, but what his mind does with it afterward. The thought begins to return. Again, and again, and again. At first he tries to push it away. When that fails, he bargains with it. He creates small mental rituals, phrases he must repeat, numbers he must count, actions he must perform in his mind, in the hope that this will neutralize the danger. He believes that if he does these things correctly, the people he loves will be spared. If he makes a mistake, they will suffer. This is the trap. The more he tries to control the thought, the stronger it becomes. The more he resists it, the more vivid it grows. It begins to feel intentional, as if his own mind is testing him, provoking him, daring him to fail. He tells me he is terrified not because the thought exists, but because part of him wonders whether having the thought means something about who he is. Doctor, he asks barely above a whisper, what kind of person thinks these things? This is the moment where most men break. But he does not scream, he does not cry, he does something far more revealing. He confesses thoughts the law cannot punish, thoughts society cannot see, thoughts that exist only in the privacy of the mind, and yet feel more damning than any action. He fears he is dangerous. He fears he is immoral. He fears that thinking is the same as doing. I do not interrupt him, because what stands before me is not madness in the common sense, it is not chaos, it is order taken too far, conscience sharpened into a weapon, morality turned inward until it begins to wound the very person it was meant to guide. This man does not lack control. He is drowning in it. The rituals do not bring relief, they only postpone the next intrusion. Each success raises the stakes, each failure feels catastrophic. His world shrinks until it contains only two things, the thought and the effort to suppress it. And so his life becomes a series of pauses. He cannot walk freely. He cannot speak freely. He cannot love freely. Because his mind has convinced him that vigilance is the only thing standing between order and disaster. As he speaks, I begin to see the pattern clearly. The thought is not the enemy. The meaning he has assigned to it is. But this realization cannot be delivered like a verdict. If I tell him too soon, he will reject it. His fear has structure. It must be dismantled carefully, piece by piece, without triggering collapse. So I ask him to continue. And as he does, the true source of his torment begins to emerge, not in the content of the thought, but in the guilt that surrounds it. Guilt that predates the thought. Guilt that has been waiting for something to attach itself to. This is not about rats. This is not about punishment. This is about responsibility carried too early, too heavily, and never set down. But he is not ready to hear that yet. First, he must understand something far more unsettling. The mind does not punish us because we are evil. It punishes us because we believe we must be punished. And in his case, the punishment has only just begun. He does not come to me only with thoughts. He comes with debts, small ones insignificant on the surface, a pair of glasses paid for by another, a sum of money owed, then repaid, then doubted, then repaid again, never correctly, never finally. Each transaction becomes contaminated by the same fear, that if it is done wrong, someone he loves will suffer. The thought attaches itself again. The punishment returns. He feels compelled to correct, to repeat, to undo and redo. What should take seconds takes hours. What should be resolved becomes endless. I watch him carefully as he explains this. His language is precise, almost legalistic, every detail accounted for, every possibility anticipated, and yet the more exact he becomes, the more trapped he appears. This is not uncertainty. This is obsession disguised as responsibility. At one point, he stops speaking and looks at me with a kind of exhausted honesty. "You must think I am cruel," he says, "to think such things about the people I love." I tell him nothing of the sort, because cruelty requires intention, and what torments him is not intention, but fear of intention. His mind treats thoughts as crimes, and itself as both judge and executioner. Gradually, another figure begins to enter the room, not physically but psychologically. His father, a man he admired, feared, lost too early, a man whose authority did not disappear with death but intensified. The father remains alive inside him as a voice of judgment, a standard that cannot be satisfied. The obsession begins to make sense. The thoughts are not random. They are accusations. Every intrusion carries the same message. You are not good enough. You are not careful enough. You have failed. And so he punishes himself in advance, hoping this will prevent a greater punishment later. This is the paradox of his condition. The rituals are meant to protect, but they only extend the trial. I begin to guide him slowly toward a dangerous realization. That a thought is not an action, and that morality does not govern the unconscious. This idea terrifies him more than the thoughts themselves. Because if thoughts are not controllable, then responsibility has limits, and limits are something he has never allowed himself. I do not ask him to stop the rituals. I do not challenge the thoughts directly. Instead, I ask him to observe them, to notice how they arise precisely when he attempts to be most moral, most dutiful, most correct. What he fears is not punishment. It is permission. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to fail without catastrophe. Permission to be human without consequence. As this understanding begins to take shape, the thoughts lose something essential. Not their content, their authority. They are still there, but they no longer command the same obedience. The mind, once treated as a tyrant, is slowly exposed as something far more fragile, a frightened guardian, enforcing rules it does not fully understand. This is not a cure. There are no cures of that kind. But there is movement. And for the first time, the pauses in his speech shorten. The silences lose their threat. He begins to speak not as a defendant, but as a witness. And that is where the real work begins. There comes a moment in every analysis when the patient realizes that what he fears most is not the symptom, but its absence. For years, his thoughts have served a purpose. They have kept him alert, they have kept him vigilant, they have given shape to his guilt. Without them, something else must take their place. Responsibility. Not the imagined responsibility for preventing catastrophe, but the real responsibility of living without guarantees. I tell him that the unconscious does not speak in morals. It speaks in wishes, fears, and remnants of earlier conflicts. It does not ask whether something is good or evil. It only repeats what has not yet been understood. The thoughts do not mean what he thinks they mean. They are not proof of cruelty. They are evidence of conflict. A conflict between obedience and desire, between loyalty and independence, between a father's law and a son's will. What terrifies him is not the thought itself, but the possibility that letting it pass without ritual might reveal something about his own freedom. And freedom for him feels dangerous. Slowly, he begins to see that the mind's most disturbing productions often arise not from depravity, but from repression. What is forced down returns in disguise. And the disguise is chosen not for clarity, but for impact. The thought shocks him because it must. It is the only way it can be heard. As this understanding settles, something subtle changes. He no longer rushes to neutralize every intrusion. He allows some thoughts to appear, linger briefly, and dissolve on their own. Nothing happens. No punishment follows. No catastrophe arrives. This absence is not relief, it is disorientation. The mind, deprived of its ritual, searches for its old certainty, but certainty does not return, only space. And in that space he begins to live again, hesitantly, imperfectly, without guarantees. I do not declare him cured, I do not offer reassurance, I tell him only this. The mind does not demand purity. It demands honesty. And honesty begins when we stop treating our thoughts as verdicts. When he leaves my office for the last time, he pauses at the door. He does not perform a ritual. He does not repeat a phrase. He simply stands there uncertain. Then he opens the door and steps out. That is all.